Welcome back, future ancestors. Today I am with Mary Telliano, who has a mission to rebrand death. Through training other death doulas to education on grief, as well as the Anam Cara Podcast, Mary is midwifing the rebirth of dying well. In order to rebrand death, we must first normalize it. Mary is connecting people to the universe that resides within them and serving as a reminder that death is here. It is something we get to experience, and it is ready to be carried into a new light. On top of that, Mary is somebody who I am currently learning from. I became familiar with her work through the Ancestors Project. And if you are unfamiliar with the Ancestors Project, one of the founders, Charlotte, was featured in a past podcast episode all about psychedelic liberation. And so, of course, I would say yes when they offered this course all about dying well, which, if you've been following my journey, you know has been a topic that I have a lot of fear around, that I'm learning to befriend. It was a big reason why I went and did my ayahuasca ceremony recently in Costa Rica, where one of my intentions was to be okay with death. I came into this work through the birth work realm 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I feel like now my ancestors are like, okay, now I want you to see this other process that is very much a part of life, but you can't run from this anymore. And so I realized that we're so afraid to speak of death more than we are speaking on topics of sex or even like money. And we tend to treat the body as this inanimate object that just that we dispose of once we take our last breath. And so I've been so grateful for Mary's teachings in the ways that has not only forced me, you haven't forced anything, but it, like, spirit has been forcing me to look at the things that I've been in deep avoidance of, uh, not just with the death, but also the process of looking at paperwork, wills, all these things that remind me of the impermanence of life. And so I am excited to dig into this conversation and for you all to receive these teachings and know that we're on this journey together. We're just renting these spacesuits, aren't we? So, Mary, I always love to first open up with asking, what is it that you are celebrating about yourself today?
The madness. The madness. When we got on this call before we hit record, the madness of how much I love doing what I do, how it inspires me, how the work that I love to cultivate and I'm exploring in my meat suit gives me more energy, and it gives me inspiration, and it enlivens me in a way that no other job or career or calling has done. So today I'm celebrating the absolute love that I have for what I'm doing.
A lot of people are getting more familiar with what it means to be a birth doula or a midwife, which I love because I feel like 6 years ago, people were still like, what is that? And a lot of people still aren't aware, but being a death doula is still a profession that's very much unheard of. And yet here you are with many clients that are in need of your medicine. But if we could strip away the title, how is it that you would describe your medicine and what it is you do?
If I was to strip away the title, what it is that I'm doing is a soul being another friend of a soul recognizing self in some way and befriending it and rising and falling with the tides of that soul as they transition from this realm to the next.
Yeah. So I don't think that anybody is a kid and grows up and says, you know what, I am going to be a death doula when I grow up. And so let's dig into your ancestral lineage and your upbringing and how this has influenced the path that you walk on today.
Yeah, I am a native Hawaiian, born and raised. And so I'm from the island. And I think that my culture really has a beautiful way of honoring the cycles in a very spiritual and subtle way, and one that's incorporated with nature. And that was my upbringing. And my first experience was with death was when I died as a little girl. And I think that was my initiation into exploring what it is to bounce from one space and then come back into the body. And as far as the lineage, I think there was something really on purpose about me choosing to be in Hawaii and to have a near-death experience as a little girl that shaped some of my curiosities as I got into my teen years. And in my teen years, I would volunteer for elderly homes. And I liked it. So from 12 to 17, that's what I was doing during my summers. And I enjoyed being there with the elderly. And I found this innocent curiosity and awareness that there was more life happening in these places than what the outside world was necessarily perceiving it to be. A lot of stories, a lot of raw emotion, a lot of realness, a lot of truth. And I think in those spaces, I became really activated. And then, throughout my 20s, I just had a career and I was working as a finance and insurance. And as I did that for 16 years, towards the end, my finance career started to change and was starting to feel confident to give people readings as they're sitting there buying a vehicle. And now I'm like, oh, your grandpa walked in with you and you're getting this car. Congratulations. And so it started to really get confident as I was doing this. And my grandfather died, and I knew after his death that this was my calling. This was something I was supposed to be doing. So that's kind of like the little subtle umbrella way of describing it in my experience with becoming an end-of-life doula.
Did you have mentors that supported you on this path, or would you say that this is something that you had to learn on your own? Because I know for myself, learning about how to support someone through death, I know there's a lot of courses out there, but for me, it was a lot of stitching these pieces together. And I feel like a lot of people just don't know that there are
Yeah.
resources available. Or we
Yeah.
just go through the process of, okay, I need to create a will. And
Yeah. I was trained and certified through ANELDA and by Henry Weiss, which he is an incredible doula and pioneer, and really brought back to life this service. And his co-teacher, Nicole, they both trained me at the same time. And after the training was over, it was a 3-day period. I just didn't let go of Nicole. I was like, you're going to be in my world forever, right? Like, don't go away, teacher. And so I continued to have her mentorship and guidance as I branched out into my volunteer work. But a lot of it, the reason why I created the Anam Cara Academy was because I really desired more one-on-one mentorship. I desired long-term mentorship. I found that there was a huge need for really holding this space as people become more comfortable with holding space for the dying. And I just started volunteering and learning that way before I developed my practice. But yeah, there's not many schools like the Anam Cara that are doing it for 90 days or a 3-month period. That I find to be extremely critical for what's happening when we decide to become doulas. Our whole body changes. We have massive energetic shifts within our nervous system. And if you are looking to do this work, I definitely recommend having some kind of mentor in your life to just reflect back to you what's happening.
Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like what has been stripped from us are the rituals and the
Mhm.
ceremonies when it comes to death. So I always love to reflect on the ways that my grandfather transitioned when he was 98 years old. He was the eldest in my mom's village in Thailand. And I remember my family telling me that we are never going to experience a funeral like his again,
Oof.
because after his generation, the children went off to the cities. Nobody wanted to be a farmer or tend to the land. It's too much work. And this man, the highest form of technology he had was this dial-up radio that he would carry and hold close to his ear to hear the news. And then he did have an old school flip phone, but otherwise, the only thing that he ever really wore was a sarong as well. Like, he only had a pair of jeans just for the days that he would go to the city, which was rare. However, when he transitioned, over 2,000 people showed up to his funeral from all over the country. And it's like, this man was not a diplomat. He was not rich. From the outside, you would just think that he was a regular farmer. And yet, when I witnessed all the people that traveled from far away to pay their respects, I couldn't help but think, like, wow, this is lineage. This is the legacy that I
Mhm.
also want to leave behind, and the stories that would surface of how he made people feel throughout his life, the karma, and how his ceremony was a cremation process. But with his ashes, we didn't put it in an urn. Instead, what we did is the monks wrapped it in this cloth as if they were turning it into this seed pod, and we planted it into the soil at this temple, which was the temple of the village, underneath a banyan tree, so that it could serve as nourishment. And instead of us going to visit a grave site, we would go and make offerings to this tree to go and commune with him. And not only that, but before they wrapped his ashes into this cloth, which, by the way, was like just this white color, and they said that that was rare for ashes to turn into something so to be white. They shaped his remains in the shape of, it was like a gingerbread man, and they prayed for his spirit to be sent off in all four directions. So not only could we commune with him through the soil, through this tree, but also through our breath, by looking up at the sky and acknowledging that he's forever here. Because in Buddhism, at least, we recognize that, okay, great, we're done with this life, on to the next one, whether that means nirvana or reincarnation. It's just a portal. And I also love how you shared with us that the first thing that we are primed to do when death happens is we call the coroner to come and take the body immediately.
Mhm.
And we don't have to do that in so many cultures. The body is actually left at the home for several days, oftentimes, where people can come and pay their respect. And we treat the body as if it is still alive, just chilling at home. And it's not that we make a crazy big deal about it. It's like, oh, here we are celebrating that, like celebrating this person's life. But I remember that as well with both my grandfather and my grandmother in Thailand. I could walk into the house and their bodies just chilling there while all of us are eating and laughing and telling stories. And I'm like, what the heck? Is this even legal?
Mhm.
So wanted to pause there. I know that was a lot, but I feel like what a privilege it is to still to even know that such ceremonies can be done in a way that is not full of I mean, grief is a normal process, but it's like we can create our own rituals and ceremonies when it comes to the dying. So curious what your experience has been like with restoring ritual and ceremony, and also some of the ways that you have experienced the reclamation of these things that really I feel so many of us are becoming awakened to, the remembrance of the ways that our ancestors celebrated death.
Yeah, I mean, ritual and ceremony gives a purpose and a meaning to the things that have no words. Losing somebody we love, like there's not enough words I can stand and tell you about like how much I love this person and how much I care about them, that there's always something that feels a little incomplete, and that is the act of ritual. And because we're creating something with the grief, we're creating something with the joy, and we're creative beings. We're here to create and to destroy. And that's the same thing in death. Death has destroyed something in the physical. And now we get to create something from the ether and bring it back into the physical and have some kind of way of honoring and being respectful and really representing the care that and the influence that this person or thing that we're honoring has been in our life. And so whatever that ceremony and ritual is, as a doula, I kind of just rise to the family's traditions, what the person has asked for. Sometimes when it's a sudden death, and maybe the family doesn't, wasn't really rooted in ritual and ceremony, then I can kind of come in with some creative ideas to honor the person. And it's typically something that I channel, and it's based on the person's energy. And I really do tap into, I'll ask them what were some of their favorite songs. And sometimes I'll just go home and play their favorite songs and just let whatever comes up to come up. And I'm allowing that person's soul to kind of show me what they would like, or maybe kind of incorporate. Yeah, ritual and ceremony is so powerful and so potent, and it's absolutely needed for our grief, because once the person's gone, what do we have left except ritual, except honoring, except, this is how we can tap back into that bridge and that portal with them as well. If you have a trinket on the altar that represents somebody, you'll walk by it a million days, and not even think about it. And then another day you'll walk by it and be like, I feel you today. I got you. I know you got me. This thing is here, and I see you now. And it just brings us back to a place where we can connect as well.
Yeah. So birth is a lot easier to discuss than death, but what are the parallels that you see between birth work and death work?
Almost the same. I've had 3 children, and I've gone through the initiation of birth, and I see so much parallels as far as the support. It's really focusing on the sacredness, focusing on the intention. And that's the same thing with the birth. The intention is to bring about this baby, and there's different ceremonies and rituals that you can do in the meantime to honor the changing of the family dynamic and the changing of the mother and the welcoming in. Some of the techniques, sometimes a doula will get behind a mother and support her back so that she can just rest back into the space and open up her hips and lead into the delivery. Same thing with somebody dying. Sometimes they're very agitated and nowhere in the bed has it been comfortable for them. And sometimes sitting them up and having them lay against you in the same way creates a flow of energy and an ease in the body. The breath is changing. When we're in delivery, we're at the end of breath, our end of life, we go through the same breathing changes. I think it's the same coin, just in reverse. When we're born from the inside out. When we die from the outside in. And so I think both are really reflecting each other. Both are really close to whatever that is that happens when we're not here. A baby is coming from that place, and a body and a soul is going in back into that place. So the energy in the room is thick, and the right word would be palatable, right? Like you can feel it. You can feel that something is happening and changing within this space. And some of the things like smells, scents. Do you want touch? Do you not want touch? Same things that you would ask a mother who is birthing a baby. Those same kind of questions as well.
Yeah, I have, ever since I was introduced to the realm of birth work, I feel like every person should be trained as a birth doula. And now I feel the same exact way about death. Like, even it doesn't mean that you need to choose this as a career, but to at least know that this is just the process of life. And I love how you said in one of our classes that death is our life coach. And so tell us more about what that means.
Yeah, death is my life coach. So I'll just explain it from my perspective and how it shows up for me. It puts things into perspective. It really aligns the things of importance in my life, so I don't get caught up on the snags, right? The things that have lesser value. It helps me really pour all of my energy into the things that I find important. So I live my life as if death can happen at any moment. That's why it's my teacher, because that's the truth. I work with people who are in treatment, people who are now in hospice, and I could die before them. That's the truth. I could die at any moment. And so I keep that into perspective, and that allows me to be more in integrity. It allows me to make the choices that I would make if this was my last day. And somehow that roots me into deeper truth, deeper understanding. And when I'm there, then I'm really affecting the people that I love around me and showing them that that's possible for them. And now I'm investing in future ancestors through my death. Now I'm investing in the future I can't see, because I have an understanding that I'm not the forever. I am the right now. And what I do today is going to influence the future. And that's why I'm so alive about rebranding death, because we are suffering in ways that we don't need to. We're living and putting things of importance in our life that if this was the last day, I would question if that would really be important for some people. Would that really be the thing?
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the common things that people regret or reflect on when they are dying?
The things they didn't do, the things they didn't say, the different dynamics in family seem to come up, of like how they wish maybe they would had more time to show this person that they love them, or had more time to explore the forgiveness in this one area. It really boils down to their personal relationships that they've had with themselves and with others.
Yeah, I feel like oftentimes we can get so caught up in just trying to accumulate these markers of success in our lifetime, and then we forget what really matters at the end of the day, right? Are these relationships? Is community? Because we don't take any of these material things when we transition. And so I love how when we start familiarizing ourselves with the death, the first process that you took us through was by first reflecting on our own. And I went into this experience with the intention of learning more about how is it that I can prepare for the death of my elders, while avoiding that, wait, I'm going to be an ancestor too. And where's it that I'm making space to ask, these questions myself of what is the kind of ancestor that I'm going to be when I transition? How is it that people are going to remember me? And then also, how is it that even though I am healthy and I'm able-bodied right now, why is it that I'm avoiding planning my own death in the here and now? Because I could transition at any time. It could happen today, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen 50 years from today. But I know that now, I know that the importance of making these plans early on, especially while I am still well, is so that when that time comes, my loved ones can have that space to grieve without stressing about the logistics of dying, especially being here in the United States.
Mm.
Yeah. So I wanted to offer this as an invitation to our listeners to start thinking about your own death, and how is it that you can start planting those seeds now so that when you transition, you can you don't have to put so much of those stressors on your loved ones. And so, Mary, for somebody who is in the process of reflecting on their own end of life, what are some of the first things that you would have them consider?
Yeah. So if a client came to me and they said, "Hey, I want to explore my death, where should I start?" I kind of start by asking them some open-ended questions, because I want to see where they're at already. Are they in the logical mind, right? Is things about planning and more of the logistics side of it? Do they have a lot of it in their estate and a lot of things that they need to plan for? Or are they looking for more of like the spiritual and energetic ways of diving into this? And based off those two things, one, maybe I would be like, here's an advanced directive, explore this and see what starts coming up for you within this. Or it would be like, hey, let's dive into, let's start off here with a death meditation and just kind of feel into the energy of death, and we might work that way. And eventually the more logical person will move them then down into the more emotional and energetic side, and the emotional energetic side, I'll move them up into the more logical side eventually. Like those bridges will cross in the timing it's supposed to. But those are two ways, to kind of determine what is the most important thing about death that you want to explore right now.
So for people who are completely new to this process, what is an advanced care directive, and what are some of the questions that people can start asking themselves now?
Yeah, so I have an advanced directive. It's available on Amazon. It's called Final Chapters. And they are logistical questions. What would you like to wear? Who would you like to dress your body? Would you like to be cremated? Would you like to be buried? Would you like to be have a sea burial? Would you like to be compost? So really getting down to the details. Do you, in there you would have a place to write, this is the account where I have saved for my funeral expenses, or maybe that's not there, and so now the family now needs to kind of navigate that space. And then it goes down to vigil questions. If you were to be in a space where you couldn't tell people what you wanted, would you want sense in the room? What kind of music would you like playing as you transition? How would you like the energy of the room to be conducted? Where would you like your bed? If you have the option to have pictures in your space, what would you want them to be? And so advanced directive is all about the logistical questions that too turn into the energetic questions as well. But we're getting down to every piece of that information, so that if you were to pass into a coma today, I can go and open up that book and be like, okay, this is where they're at, and we'll proceed this way. And it frees up a lot of bandwidth and guessing from the family and friends. Yeah.
I just started asking my own mother these questions, and even last night we were at the kitchen table, and I'm like, "Hey, Mom, so where do you want to die?" And she's like, "Oh, I just want to die in a hospital room. I don't want to make it a big deal." And I said, is it because you don't want to inconvenience us, your children?
Mhm.
And she's like, yeah. I was like, Mom, whatever kind of ceremony you want, you get to have. And she's like, oh no, I'm going to be gone already. And I was like, but Mom, okay, so if you want to die in a hospital, how do you want it to be decorated? And I could even feel her energy not wanting to be a burden to us, the
Mhm.
living. And I'm like, no, it would be an honor to create this experience for you so that we can celebrate your life. And
Mhm.
I feel like oftentimes we want to impose our own ideas of what death can look like for our loved ones versus honoring whatever choices they want to make. And it's even our own attachment to them living to where we can, and this is really hard, like to where we can then even prolong
Yeah.
someone's life
Mhm.
when we already know that the death is inevitable. And thankfully that's not my experience. But yeah, I remember one of the things that you said was on how oftentimes we'll force somebody to eat, like, eat, you need this to stay alive, versus just accepting how it is that they want to treat their body in this moment. So what would you say to somebody who may be going through that process of um, being so close to that mortality,
Mhm.
and them wanting to be a good caretaker, but also honoring the sovereignty of this person?
Mm. That is a good question. So I truly believe that death is for the living. So like, when we do these ceremonies and these rituals, one, we're honoring the person that is transitioning and their wishes, but two, we're getting to honor something about us and our own, our death when it comes. And we're learning about our death through witnessing somebody die too. There's a very beautiful exchange that can happen. But when somebody is wanting to not have to be the burden, right? So like we're just taking your case
Mhm.
into perspective, doesn't want to be the burden, but you as the child have a deep desire to to create this beautiful space for your mom because she's your mom. um I also really encourage people to look like her not wanting to be a burden is her way of gifting you something in her eyes. That is her final gift to you. And so like being able to be the child and stand back and be like, but I want to do this, but I also want to honor that. It's a push and pull, right?
Yeah.
um and so I run into this a lot with families where the dying person is not in a place where they don't want to do a legacy, they don't want to do a vigil, and the family's like, please, we want to do this for you. And so this is this
Mm.
final act of love,
Mm.
and it's a war, and it's based and rooted in love for each other. And so I bring a lot of awareness and reflection on that because both people are right. both people are totally in the right here.
Well, I mean, I do think this is something else that I am curious about is when it comes to leaving that legacy, like what does that even mean? Because I feel like there's a lot of pressure then when it comes to making the best out of our life, but I do feel like what a gift it is to leave something in this physical realm for the next generation to reflect on. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, oftentimes we were exploring how we want to impose our own ideas
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what death can look like for a dying person.
When it comes to food, that's where I was like going with
Yeah.
that. When it comes to the food, like imposing like you have to eat because that makes, if you don't eat then you're going to die, and it's like this impending death. What I help bring light to people, I would say families, it's more so really if it upsets the family more than it upsets the person who doesn't want to eat.
Yeah.
The body is wise, the body knows what to do, and dying is a lot harder to do with food in your system. The body at the end of life doesn't have the capacity to break things down It doesn't need food anymore. And so I remind people that, that this is the body's way of what it needs to do. And the act of not eating is very personal for the families, because it's also a love language. Everything in their life has been celebrated around food, birthdays, weddings, holidays, everything is centered around food. And so food is a very interesting love language as well. And it's like, eat my special soup. I made it special. This is the one you've always liked, right? And they don't want it. And so it's a very complicated situation that's actually very not complicated. The body just doesn't need it. And the more people eat, the stronger they become, and the body doesn't need to become strong with the work that they're doing.
Yeah. So what does it mean then to start thinking about ways we can create our legacy?
Yeah. Our legacy is in everything that we're doing that has any kind of connection to our dharma, I think. It's my dharma to be a mother. It's my dharma to be a part of rebranding death. Those are the things that I'm connected to, that those are my truths in this lifetime. And so anything that connects you back to that dharma, back to the path, back to what it is you're really here to create, whatever that is, I think that's where the legacy is born, and that's where it lives, and that's where it will always live.
What are alternatives to us getting cremated or thrown into a casket? Because I don't think people realize that you can die however it is you want. And so, for example, there's people who are choosing to get put into these seed pods and become trees. But what are some of the other creative forms of death that we may not even be considering?
Yeah. So besides the tree and the cremation and the coffin, people are now becoming privy to becoming compost. People are now being privy to breaking down the body and all of its elements in water, so that we're not using and setting all of this poisons and toxins into the air, and we're being more resourceful. There are different green burial sites where, you can be born. Well, I guess that's the right word.
Yeah.
There's these green burial plots where you don't have to have like the regular casket. You can have a cardboard casket, and your family can write and draw and paint all over it as well. And so, yeah, these are just some of the ways. And then we keep coming up with so many things. The death positive movement is in full motion, and we are really navigating and exploring different ways to break down the body and give back to the earth.
Yeah, because you were talking about the history of, what is it, embalming a body?
Embalming. Yeah. Yeah. Would you like that?
Yeah. Because that's something that's more recent, which actually blew my mind, because it also it made me reflect on the military industrial complex and the ways that we have accepted these death rituals that are inherently colonial to be the norm. So let's briefly touch on that
for your podcast too. Yeah, this is just where I like to talk about this story, because I like to tell people we're not as distant from death as we think we are. We just forgot about it. And this is where we forgot about it in the Western culture. And so I don't know, when was that war? 120 years ago? 100-ish 20 years ago, the Civil War. People were dying in the North and people were dying in the South, and the train conductors were like, we're done with this. The bodies stink. We can't do this. It's too much to be bringing the bodies back and forth. And so Abraham Lincoln was feeling the pressure of the families that wanted to grieve their loved one, but also needing to listen to the workers and what their complaints were. And so he employed doctors to begin embalming bodies, so that the body would be preserved long enough so it could get back to the North or the South, and the family can go through their rituals. Before the Civil War, we were dying in the home. We were born in the home. Grandpa, you buried him in the backyard. no big deal. So we were very accustomed to the birth and death cycle. Kids saw it their whole life. And at this point, this is where this stopped. And so after the Civil War, there were all these jobs that were created for these doctors. And this was their cash grab. And they're like, wait, we don't want to stop what we're doing. We want to still make money. And so this is where undertakers, mortuaries, funeral homes, and embalming became a business. And this is where us as a grieving country, because we were grieving as a collective, whether we believed in the North or the South, like both sides were sad. The energy of our continent was grief. And you imagine when you're in grief, like if someone's like, hey, I'll come take this off your hands, you're like, please take it. Like that's one less thing I need to worry about. And that's what happened. We handed over death to businesses. And so from there, we began to forget. We weren't close to the bodies anymore. As soon as somebody would die, the business comes in and takes the body and does what they need to do. And then they prepare it and they honor it and how, through their business. And then you get to come and view it maybe. And then they take it away, put it in the casket, so everything became disconnected after the Civil War. And now we're just remembering. Now that forgetfulness is becoming a squeeze on something we can't necessarily identify. Some people have no idea that the reason why they're suffering is because they're afraid of death. And we're becoming more acquainted with that energy now because it was never intended for us to forget it in the first place.
We are a country of grievers and the suppression of it. And I have a friend who recommended this book to me. What was it called? The Smell of Earth, the smell of rain on dust. Do you know what book I'm talking about? I'll have to.
Really
okay,
good
well,
book.
I'll have to pull up the name, but it's essentially about how it's about the colonization of death and grief, and how so much of the violence that is in our country, in the United States in particular, is the result of how we don't know how to express our grief. And so the ways that it manifests is through violence, is through these policies that are harming humanity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the work that you're doing to hold space for grief, we and something that I'm learning in this process is that we equate grief to an emotion versus seeing it as a call to action, as an invitation to look within, to wake up, to allow ourselves to feel all of these other emotions that we have suppressed because we only want to focus on the things that feel good. And we see death as something to fear, as a stigma. And so I love how you say that death is your life coach, because it is that opportunity to live every single breath as if it is our last, but to not do it irresponsibly either. And so, like, where is it that we find that dance, though, between grief and joy?
Yeah, I say the proper way to look at that is to really put into perspective what love is. Can you love somebody like it doesn't belong to you? Can you love your job like it's not yours forever? Can you love your body like it doesn't belong to you as well? When we start doing that, then we become somewhat unattached and more of the observer. And then when we become the observer, we can start to be more playful with the grief and the joy. And when I say playful, it means just an allowance without making it the thing that becomes a part of your story and then becomes overdone to where like that story doesn't allow you to open up again. Wherever that is. I know grief constricts the heart. Grief makes us curl in. Grief makes us smaller. And it does that for a moment because our nervous system needs a moment to re-alchemize in that stillness, in that protection, in that space where we don't need anything else around us, but just to listen to the wisdom of our heart. But then grief is calling us then to now open and expand and to be in appreciation of what this loss brought to us. Because loss always brings something, whether we want to admit it or not. It makes room for something else. And life will always find a way to break you open to make opportunities for you. And grief and loss is a big portal for that.
Mm-hmm. The book is called The Smell of Rain on Dust. Grief and
I love
Praise.
the name. I mean, I know I want to read a book always based on the name. Like if someone says a book, I'm like, oh, that sounds great.
Yes,
like, I'm not going to read that. But with that one, I can feel into the title. So yeah, please share that with me.
Yes, absolutely. By Martin Prechtel, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Okay, so for those of us, for individuals who are adverse to grief, even to death, I feel like this is also something that is common. For example, one of my best friends, she just lost her partner, and it was so frustrating when he did transition, because throughout the last 2 years of his life, as much as she wanted to go through the death planning process with him, he was so resistant to it because he was just tied to this belief that he was going to be okay, even though his diagnosis was terminal. And so what would you say to somebody who is supporting someone, or who may be an individual that refuses to even accept that death is inevitable, and so they may not even want to follow through with the planning process?
They have all the room and space on the road to live that way and to die that way. It would make us feel so much better if they accepted it, right? Because now we're on the same page, and now we're interacting and kind of having the same language and conversation, and it feels like we're moving in the proper direction, which is the truth. And we might see that denial in them and see that as something that is unhealthy, and maybe it is. It would be, but I say give that person the room to die that way. If they want to die in the space of thinking that they'll get better, fine. If they get curious, if this is starting to create dis-ease within them, this denial, when I say dis-ease, not the disease, but like that denial, if you can see it creating friction in their life, then just start asking them open-ended questions. Don't ask them a question with a yes or a no. Help them explore that in a safe container so that then maybe they can get to that place and understanding on their own.
Yeah. And I also feel like it's moments like this where it is great to consider having a death doula on your team, because oftentimes when we are so close to this person who is going through this process of death, or even our own death, there's that emotional attachment, that charge to it, to even when you were talking about the power of attorney. It's like, do you want to have one person? Do you want to have your daughter? Like, I'm just speaking for myself. It's like, okay, mom, you really want me to be all the things, medical and financial person that makes the decisions? Because I don't know, I might be busy grieving, and also there's other family members. And so it is times like this where it's great to say, okay, we need a third party that is neutral and isn't just somebody who can be present for the legal and medical end of things, but the emotional, to hold space for all of us, because what it comes down to is that we're all grieving. And so when would you say is also a great time to consider having a death doula in your life?
I would say a good time to incorporate a death doula would possibly be if you're in diagnosis is a great place to hire, whether that diagnosis you do become healthier and the treatments are working. Sometimes having a doula there to hold that space is important because death is definitely coming up. That's a great place to start. But my scope of practice is interesting and people kind of bring me in all across the board. So sometimes I'll come in at diagnosis, sometimes I'll come in a day before they die, and sometimes I come in right after they die or maybe years after they die just to support the grief. So I think wanting a doula would be great anytime that you have that inkling of like, I think there's something else here that needs to be supported. The bandwidth
Yeah.
of the family is becoming heavy. A hospice isn't really providing the emotional support and the spiritual support because they can only come in and do their job and leave. So when you feel that there's a deficit or something that you could have more of, I think that would be a good time to call in a doula.
Hmm. And I have a feeling that there are people listening to this asking themselves, well, how is it that I can learn to be a better space holder? Or maybe you're somebody that has experienced death in your life and now you're feeling called to step into that role of a death doula. So tell us more about this school that you've created, Mary.
Yeah, the Anam Cara Academy. And Anam Cara is a Celtic term that just equates to soul friend. So that is the meaning of the word Anam Cara. And yeah, so if you're looking to explore it, going to an end of life school, going to something where you can be in a container, ask questions, and really kind of refine or define what this is for you would be so crucial. I think that this should be in the curriculum of all the schools in elementary
Agreed.
school.
Hmm.
I think that rebranding death really starts with the children. And yeah, but this school is a mystery school. And so how I created is kind of like a lotus flower. The very nucleus, the center of it is the first couple weeks we're exploring your death. We're not even talking about holding space for anybody else or anything like that. And really shining light there. One, because that's a gift to have. And two, it's important for if this is a service you're going to do, just to separate what your fears are versus the ones you're going to serve. Because we get to have our own fears and stuff about death too, but also knowing how to separate that and not bleed it into our service is very good not to do. And then it flowers out into legacy, vigil, reprocessing death. I teach people about pets and death, children and death, death and psychedelics, the integration of all of that. And yeah, and it's a 90-day program, 3 months. And then at the very end of it, my graduate students come to me or come with me because I don't live there. So we go to a place called Tepoztlan, Mexico. And this is where we have our retreat every year over Day of the Dead. And we come together and we celebrate and really, unify and celebrate the end of their program in a culture that is openly embracing death and walking through the cemeteries and really getting into that energy. We sit with plant medicine as well. And yeah, that is the wrap up of that container. And then I never go away. My students don't know this until they actually go through the program and they're like, oh, I went through her program years ago and they're always welcome to call on me for support. I don't end my contract with my students when the 3 months is up or like the retreat is over. I'm always here to support them because this is the web and the network and it desires to constantly have people reflecting, and my commitment to my students is till the end of my life.
Mm. Yeah, I tell people my business is just an excuse to create the very community it is that I prayed for.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm like, where are you guys? Folks,
Well,
come and
and
play with me.
I was just talking about this yesterday, and it's a mystery school, and it's a mystery to me too. As I facilitate the school, I'm constantly seeing how the energy of death is molding and shaping all the different students. And I didn't realize this till yesterday. And I was talking to my sister on the phone, and we were in reflection to where we are at as a society, as a whole, as a world, and just kind of going through that kind of conversation. And I realized that the Anam Cara students, what I have been doing without really knowing it until yesterday, is I'm building an army.
Yeah.
building a massive army that is going to be so needed for what is called for us with whatever's coming next in this world. Like the army is all about rebranding death, and they're on fire. My students are on fire, they're activated, they're out there, they're doing the work. And I didn't realize that's what was coming through until yesterday. And I was like, wow, this is just an army of Anam Cara people doing it.
Come on, Mary. You know that we came into this earth into spiritual warfare. And so
Yeah.
what is it that we are doing while we have this armor
Mhm.
to be prepared for what is inevitable? Because we are literally here for just a short blip of time. We were talking about this before recording, how we are already in an apocalypse, but the apocalypse doesn't mean that it's like, yes, there's death involved, death, doom, and gloom, and there's also the flip side to it. And so we get to choose our story, the legacy that we're going to leave behind. We can succumb to the fear of death, or we can embrace it as our teacher. And
Mhm.
as legacy makers, knowing that every decision it is we make in this lifetime is rippling out, not just to our ancestors, but to the ancestors that are returning, the reincarnated ones, the future generation, who will look to those that chose to be a part of this battle for, I feel, truth, justice, and light, and place us on the altar of their own hearts, or on the physical altar, to call upon us whenever they are in their moments of self-doubt and questioning, what is the meaning of my own life?
Mhm.
That's it. This is just
Wow.
ancestor training.
Yes. Ancestor training. I love this. Yes. I
Yeah.
love how you
Yeah.
said that.
So,
Yeah.
Mary, what is it that you are doing to stay rooted in these times of change,
Mm,
the apocalypse? And what is it that you are learning to release?
Okay. So staying rooted, I think it's a constant practice of my own modalities. Um, Whenever I'm in service to other, that might be a lot of energy that comes through. Recognizing that the energy that's coming through me to support others, not mine, has really helped me stay rooted and grounded into my body and what being human is. Because, in this service, you can get really light and really airy. And so
Mhm.
breath work, energetic clearing techniques, somatic movement. I no longer put on or go to a yoga class and follow somebody else's movements, although I think that's really valuable sometimes. Now it's about my own yogic movements that involve sound and a creation of what wants to live through me. So kind of taking it to like a different yogic perspective for myself helps me kind of get rooted. Being in service to others helps me be rooted in these times, making as much impact as I am called to make in the moment. And what was the second question? I was just about
What are
to
you
say
learning to let go or release?
that's an interesting question. What am I letting to let go or release? I don't feel like I'm letting, I think I'm just reframing a lot of stuff. So anything that would maybe be framed as like release, it's not like necessarily leaving me or going anywhere that's not a part of me, because everything I see is me and everyone I see is a part of, extension of myself. So where could it really go? I'm just reframing constantly what is being told to me and what is my truth.
Mhm. And my last question that I love to ask all of my guests is, if you can envision yourself as a future ancestor, looking
Mm.
back on your life today, what is the wisdom it is that your future ancestral self would have to share?
Mm. It was what I had said in at one point in this podcast is love everything like it doesn't belong to you.
Mm. Just tucking those words into the altar of my own heart. Thank you so much, Mary, for choosing this path, for walking this path. Maybe, I mean, it clearly chose you. And thank you for being my own teacher when it comes to looking at my own death and reframing that, alchemizing that from fear into excitement for life and every breath as prayer and as an opportunity to love deeper and deeper and deeper. So if you're feeling called to walk this path of death, really the celebration of life, then please check out Mary's work. I'll link her website in the show notes. And may we all use this as an opportunity to die well.
Oh,